Welcome to the Griefy Girls Book Club, where every month we dive into a griefy read. From memoirs to biographies to fantasy, romance, and beyond. If it touches on grief, it's fair game. We're your hosts. I'm Kendel Rogers.
And I'm Rachel Dwyer. You might know us from our podcast, Two Girls with Grief. For us, reading is both healing and a powerful way to explore grief. So we knew it was time to give it the attention it truly deserves. Join us as we unpack our favorite moments, chat about upcoming reads, and even host interviews with guest authors. And you can bet we'll be yapping about our ever-growing TBR piles too.
So, whether you're here for the books, the banter, or a little bit of both, we're so glad to have you with us. Let's read, reflect, and grow in our grief together.
Welcome to the final installment of The Divine Rivals, if you can see it beyond the green screen. This book, it ends with a bang. Kind of literally, figuratively, but it's a lot of emotions in these last chapters. What are your initial thoughts, Kendall?
Oh, this was phenomenal. Like you already know, I picked up the book before we had even planned to record this episode because I had to know what happened for the rest of the chapters. I was so on the edge of my seat. I needed to know how the story ended. And like I had said to you last time in the last episode, I'm a little worried. I was worried how it was going to end, and I see why now.
Yeah, because it's like you're like, wait, it was happy and then it's not, but you're like, obviously this book doesn't just lean on happy.
Yeah.
So it's like you it's not like the rug is pulled out from under you. You're like waiting for it to happen. Like it's not just like a surprise or like it was happy the whole time and then it just like it's expected in ways. Like it's not like a total shock. But before we get into the chapters, is there anything that you're reading right now that you're excited about or that's coming out?
Yeah, I am looking for a good Stephen King book that we can read that wasn't as traumatizing as Pet Sematary. So I'm reading Green Mile, which is much more slower, not slower, slower is not the word. It's not as intense in grief. But still a lot of great conversations about life and death. And so I've seen the movie many times, but I'm wondering if the book has more commentary around grief and those emotions that we have, especially in regard to the prison system. And that's something we've never touched on before in our other podcasts. So so that's what I'm reading now. And then I have a stack. I'm reading the romance Scottish book that you gave me. And so I'm about a third of the way through that, and it's super cute, set in a Scottish setting. And then a couple nonfiction, so a couple just like workbooks. But what about you?
So I feel like I am just like now because it's March, I'm like, oh my God, April means that like the new Abby Jimenez and Emily Henry books are coming out. And I feel like just because I'm in that's the realm of the books that I read, like I choose generally very happy books because that's where my brain needs to go. When you lose two parents and a sister, you need your brain to go to the happy places, to the happy romance places, to like the happy endings. That's where my brain likes to stay. So I lean towards those books. So I feel like I've been on a one-track mind of like those are coming out soon and I want to read them. And Abby Jimenez around Valentine's Day released like a short story. And I don't usually like short stories because I feel like as soon as I get into it, it ends. And I'm like, and generally don't have like the happy ending. And I'm like, why did I read you? What was the point? Don't take me on this journey for it to just end prematurely. But she has a short story called The Fall Risk. And I feel like it was like pretty short, but you still like felt the connection with the characters. Obviously, it's a short story, so you expect that. But I felt like it was a pretty complete story. And it didn't end and I was like, what the F? Like I need more. It was just kind of like, okay, I'm not like that attached to the characters that like I need to know more or like I'm that attached to them. So it was like I just needed something to get me out of the reading slump because I kept trying to start books and end books and just kept, what do you call it, like just DNFing it, like just like I can't finish this. So I feel like it was a book that I needed to read, and I just read it in like 45 minutes or something, or an hour, because it's a short story. So I feel like I just needed that to like get myself back into like the reading. Yeah, just like get myself back on the roll to read something. So that was that book. But I'm just like, I feel like now that it's March, I'm like, I need the Emily Henry and Abby Jimenez books. I just can't wait for those to come out. Much different realm.
Yeah, there's a
So
lot of anticipation for them.
yeah, I feel like every time I go on like book talk, it's just like that's what I see. It's just like everyone's ready for it. So, but back to the chapters at hand. We're going through chapters 36 to the epilogue, and this is just where there is a cliffhanger at the end. In case you weren't aware or you're reading slower than us, and for some reason watching this before, it does leave on a cliffhanger, but not like Fourth Wing type. I mean, maybe it is. Maybe because I read both books, I don't feel as like left on a hanger because I know the ending. So I don't know. We'll let Kendall decide for that. But 36 just opened up and it was very cute, like the garden, and you see their setting, and I feel like that's kind of like their place in a way, and that's a place where like Keegan, Marisol, like I feel like the garden is just like the special representation of love that just like is for all of their
Yeah.
relationships. And I liked in this chapter, Iris talks about like her removing her armor for Kit and how she had to let her guard down to let him in. And even after she found out that Carver was Kit, and she was like relieved because she was like in love with both of these people and she wanted it to be this person, she just was like scared. And so she tried to put her armor back up, but realized like, no, she wants to let him in and she wanted to merge the two together. And that's when she had him read his letters to her out loud. And I thought that was just like very cute. And it also just shows her personality because there was a moment where she's like, she asked him, and in her head, she was like, he won't do it for me. It's asking too much. And he was like, I'll do it. And I feel like it's so real with dating, right? And then with life, it's like you don't want to ask someone something because you're afraid they're going to let you down. And I think that's when you are afraid to let people in because you don't want them to hurt you. And I just like this relationship because he always shows up for her. And I think they're just like, they're really cute and sweet.
Yeah, I agree. It was a very romantic, and it was almost too happy. It's too happy for knowing that we had a few more chapters left to go.
Yeah, this is where you're like waiting for the shoe to drop. And then Kit
Yeah.
proposes to her in this episode, or in this chapter. And so it's all like happy go lucky, very sweet. And they're like planning to get married like right away because time is short. And the next chapter, 37, goes kind of in that same pace. Like they're like, let's write together. And they're writing across from each other with their matching typewriters and just like very cutesy, like very like this is a happy ending, but you like there's 4 chapters left. You're like, this isn't the happy ending, but it feels like it, but it's not. And she says something in the line, which I feel like is just very relatable with the grief. As she says, I don't deserve to be this happy, not when there's so much pain and terror and loss in the world. Because she's like, we're so happy, but there's a war going on. There's this and that. And I feel like you can feel that for a lot of things. You can feel that in the current state of the world today. I think a lot of people with grief, you'll hear them say that they don't feel like they should be happy when someone's gone. And I really liked what Kit said. And he said, do you think we should live in a world made only of those things? Death and pain and horror, loss and agony. It's not a crime to feel joy, even when things seem hopeless, Iris. Look at me. You deserve all the happiness in the world, and I intend to see you have it. And I think that's such a positive outlook because there is so much negative in the world. There are so many things that will bring you down. There's so many sadness, there's heartbreak, there's all this stuff. You deserve to feel the joy. And that's, I feel like, kind of in a turning point where I think we are a lot with our grief journey too, as well as like finding that joy and focusing on that joy and not as much just on the pain, because that pain is always there, but not trying to make that the forefront on our mind. And I thought that was just a really great piece that kind of just like really aligned with our grief journey of just like there's so much sadness and pain, but like you deserve to be happy. And I think people need to remember that. Like that sadness and the missing people and all that, it's always gonna be there, but we need to be the ones to be like, we're gonna be happy. Like we're gonna be as happy as we can be in a world without the people that we love. But what was your take on that quote?
Yeah, it was also a quote that stood out to me, and exactly to echo everything you said, it's a mindset you have to lean into when you're grieving, and that you do deserve happiness even though you do feel sad. And you and I talk all the time how those two things can coexist at the same time. Um, I think the other like harsh reality of it is that you can go through a sad period of time, you know, create create a lifestyle afterwards where you are striving to be happier, and then another thing comes at you and hits you again. Like you obviously know, like this is your whole grief journey, and that it's still just as important, even if the other shoe will drop eventually, even if bad things will happen again. That fight to stay happy and find joy and create good in the world is always worth putting in that effort.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully said. It's like you don't know what's going to happen, and if the whole time you're just thinking about how everything sucks, it's like something bad at some point will happen again. And then you just
Mhm.
stay there and you just stay in that place that I will be happy in the future or I deserve happiness in the future. And we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. So like try to find the happiness today because who
Yeah.
knows what tomorrow is. And unfortunately, it'd be nice if we lived in a world where everything, your health was always perfect. There was no war, there was no hatred, there was no nothing. But things happen. So try to find as much happiness. And I feel like this book has so much in it, right? Like it's not just like a young adult romance. There's so many just very like just deep, thought-provoking points in this book that
Yeah.
really moved me. A lot more than just like some other romances that I read where it doesn't get this deep. It's a lot more.
Yeah, she weaves in a lot of philosophical kind of topics without it feeling stuffy or academic, but this is real, like, well, real life as a fantasy could be,
Yeah.
but this is,
So many real
war really
elements.
happens. Yeah. Grief is a real thing. We lose people all the time, and so I think through her journey is where we're facing, and that's what I love about reading about grief in fiction, is that you can confront these topics without having to read about it in a nonfiction format, because this just feels more immersive and challenges your own thoughts around these topics without you having to be like, well, this is sterile and dry and boring. This was a quick book, like very fast to read.
Yeah. And just so much happening. Like you couldn't miss a beat. Like you had to stay focused because
Mhm.
like there were so many little things. And then of course in this chapter, as it's like very cute, proposal, sweet moments, and then Keegan comes and they need to evacuate. Like, of course. And as they're trying to like running around, Kit like pulls her in for a kiss. And I don't know if he said this or who said this, but I made the quote, the note of this quote. Even when the world seems to stop, threatening to crumble, and the hour feels dark as the siren rings, it isn't a crime to feel joy. And I don't know who said this. Do you remember who said this? I just like made the note that I like this quote. But I mean, I feel like it's like what
Yeah,
we were
it's
saying.
so relevant.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
the world is burning. That doesn't mean that you can't feel joy in the moment. Like, try to feel joy in whatever way that you can. And then in this chaos, Keegan gives Iris a letter that basically says that her brother's alive and that he just got injured, but that's why he hasn't been able to write to her. And so originally, Iris and Kit were going to evacuate because Kit's injured, and then she decides to stay because she wants to find Forrest because he's apparently like very close. But and then of course Kit decides to stay with her. And this is kind of the foreshadowing of the next episodes or next chapters where they see boot marks in the house and like someone was in the B&B because there's boot marks all over their papers. And that kind of goes into chapter 38 where then they find out like someone
Yeah,
stole a
someone
dash
stole
pack.
their stuff.
Yeah, and then you're like, okay, someone's lurking, like who is this person? And and then his jumpsuit is missing, his extra one, and then throughout all this chaos, they get married. Like as they're supposed to like be evacuating all this stuff, they make time to have like a very sweet wedding in the garden with just the few of them. Chapter 39 is where the wedding happens, and Kit's crying, seeing Iris down the aisle, and just like a very sweet moment. They had like, I think, very short vows and then, officially married. And it was sweet because Addie decorated the room, and this is very much like a fade to black. It is young adult, so like it seems like they consummate the marriage, but that's not like the point of that scene. It's just that like, they're getting to know each other, and just a very like nice intimate moment that like we don't see, which I think is fine. Like I don't think you need to see, especially when there's like young adults. Like we're good just being like it's a sweet moment between them. And then Iris asks him to do the same thing, or uh Kit asks Iris to do the same thing, to read a letter to him, and he told her that he rereads the letters like every night. Which I thought was really sweet. Like that's where they really fell in love, even though he kind of had, the external and the internal of getting to know her. He reread the letters, and that just shows like how much he cared about her. And he said that he reads them every night. But he did the same where he made her read the letters to him out loud, and it just shows like they're just like it's so cute. They're just like a very cute couple. And she said that Kit made her brave, but what I liked is that Kit was like, no, you've been brave this entire time and you made me more brave. And I feel like it's nice when like he just knows her, he notices all the things and he can point it out, and he doesn't take credit where he doesn't just feel like he deserves it. And like you said, like about Iris, like she is a strong character, but I don't think she always sees herself as a strong character. Like she makes very
Yeah.
bold, strong decisions. She has a lot of gumption, but at the same time, she's like doubting herself in other areas. But she still, I feel like, usually makes a strong decision, even if like there's self-doubt and stuff along the way. Like she still gets very bold with the decisions that she makes.
Yeah, and I mean, she's only a girl. She's only what, like 18, and yet so rooted in trying to do what's right. Even when it's at risk to her or her mission of finding her brother, she was still really focused on helping soldiers. She's like, me fighting in this battle, because she's like now a soldier. She's not a war correspondent anymore.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I think she's very like, yeah, I think, and that's how a lot of grievers feel, like very, when you're dealing with loss, you feel insecure and you feel unsupported, and you don't know what to do next in your life. And you can see that even though she's dealing with those very similar things, that on the outside looking in, I'm pretty sure a lot of people see that way with grievers too, of like, look how strong you are. Look at how much you've had to go through and deal with and
Yeah.
figure out on your own, even when the griever themselves feel like, well, I don't feel that way.
Yeah. Like you don't feel this at all. Um, so this is now where the chaos really, like they have their sweet moment, and then all of a sudden it's just like 0 to 60 even more. Clovertown falls. Keegan was on their like special hill, and they find out their hill's bombed, and then but Keegan's alive. There's soldiers everywhere. People, there's bodies, and then there's like something that seems like a bomb drops between Iris and Kit, and she falls into this dream of like, this is chapter 41 already, where she's like, she sees her Nan, she has Forrest, Kit, and then she wakes up and she's like trying to find Kit, and she can't find him, and someone grabs her and telling her like, come on, come on, and she thinks it's Kit, and she's like going along with it, and then she's trying to get away, because then I think she sees Kit behind her calling for her on the ground, and that's when she realizes like, oh, it's not Kit. But then realizes it's her brother, because he says, stop fighting me, little flower. And then the last thing that happens is like a green like a green cloud swallows Roman, and she's like, oh my god, what happened? And so then 42 is just like, she looks back and like Roman's not there, and she just kept writing like these like, it doesn't really say where she writes it, so I don't know if she's typing it up or just like writing these letters to Kit, like these like kind of manic letters trying to like reach out to him.
Yeah, I thought they were, like, in her head,
Yeah.
like, not like not like she's telepathic or anything, but she's, like, if because I don't think she has her, typewriter with her. I don't
Yeah.
think. She might, but you're in the middle of actual war, like, I don't know if she did.
Yeah,
But
I
I
don't
think,
remember.
like, these are letters she wants to write to him.
Yeah, but like we don't know exactly. We definitely know they're not getting to Roman, but I don't know if she's using her alouette or what. Like I don't know the circumstances of that. But it just she writes all her like she's
Yeah,
writing
or
all these
maybe
panic to
did her
him.
brother have one? Like, I don't know.
No, there's only three. One's in the museum, one's Roman has, I don't think has currently with him, and then one she has. So, or I don't know what she has right now, but she just kept
Yeah,
writing
so
in
then
between all of this. And then she finds out like her brother found her necklace and he was working for Docra or Docker or whatever. And the necklace that he saw was the only thing that like helped him snap out of his like power magic hold that he had on him, and he was able to run away to go find her. And that's when she realized like he has these like fatal wounds that should have made him die. And she finds out that like he basically had to just do what Docker said because he saved him. And so then he was like bound to him. But like his love for his sister was powerful enough that he broke it away, which I think is a very powerful thing. Like to be able to like to like break that bond, I think is a pretty
mhm.
powerful thing and shows how much he loves her. And so he finally like Iris does convince them to go back to look for Kit. He's not there. And he kind of tells them about like how bad it's been and he had to do all these horrible things. And then he takes them back to Oath. And so they go back to this, to their little apartment with no light. And he tells him about how he had to fight for him. And then the chapter ends with Iris going in her room and she finds a letter that Kit sent that said, "Hi, Iris, it's me, Kit." Kit did tell her, but just like too late. And that was a letter that she was like, "No, if I see it, I might change my mind." And that really would have changed. Who know? Like who knows what would happen had she seen that letter? So she was just like, "Oh, that's where it's like a big moment." And then we're already at the epilogue, and you find out that Kit is with Dakra, and his soul. He says like his soul's so anguished. Like why didn't he just lay down and die? And that's like his soul's so sad that he got separated from Iris because he's always like we are better together. He was like we need to hold hands forever. Like he didn't want to be separated. And but then Dakra is excited because he's like he's a correspondent. He's not just like an army grunt. And so he's so excited. And then you see like he's like ushering him to like do his role. Like you fix him up, and now he's like, okay, he's gonna be my correspondent. And that's where it ends.
And it was such a cliffhanger because we get a double whammy. We figure out what happened with her brother, and
Yeah.
now we lead Roman to the dark side.
Yeah. And we're like, okay, this is this is a lot. So yeah, it was very you're like, okay, what's gonna happen? And you just hear about like how hard of experience that was for Forrest, and then you realize like, okay, now Kit is in this experience. And Iris is like frantic and sad. That's her husband. And it also is like a weird parallel, and it'll play out in book 2 as well, where like Kit is her person, but also like I feel like for a moment she should have been happier to see her brother, who she was like obsessed with reuniting with. Like it was just a weird also thing where I'm like, you just found your brother that you thought was dead, and then you thought he was alive again, and you've been, you know, decision to go to war was because of him, and then you find him and you're just like, Kit, Kit, where are you? And that's, I think, one of the only aspects where I'm like, this is your brother that you have this amazing relationship with. And yes, Kit, but you've only known Kit for like 6 months or something. So,
You've
like,
only been married for a day.
yeah. And so it's like, it's a very sweet story and I like their bond, but there is a part of me, I was like, your brother, like, you don't seem happy to see him. You're
Yeah.
just like, let me go back for Kit. And not that you should just like abandon your person, but at the same time, like, 6 months to like your brother. And it wasn't like he was a bad brother, like he was a good brother.
Yeah.
So I did have like a little bit of an issue with that piece of it where I was like, really?
Yeah, I felt the same way where I was like, we're asking too many questions about where Roman is, and I have a lot of questions about the brother and and we need to get to that. And they do get to the point about like what happened with the brother and how everything went down. But yeah, I was the same way. I was like, girl, we need to kind of not reevaluate priorities, but we need to have an
Kind of.
assessment of like,
Kind of. Like,
yeah,
I know you have this big love with Roman, and I'm all about these love. Obviously, I read a lot of romance books. I'm all about the big love.
yeah,
But, I mean, let's talk about current dating culture. You do all that, and then they just disappoint you. So, like, let's maybe not do that.
yeah.
You want, like, the big
Yeah,
love
in
story.
in some sense, like, I think it also kinda shows that, her brother isn't the same anymore, like, something in his personality has changed, and she kinda mentions it as well as, like, he's not the same. And could that be from war? Of course, like, that is what happens when people go off into really, like, traumatic situations like that, they don't come back the same all the time,
Yeah, I think a lot of the
but
time.
also yeah, um but he also was, like what was, like, brainwashed or controlled by the dark side, so, he fundamentally might just be different because he had to kinda go against his own values for a while.
Yeah. And that's hard. I mean, also he was like magically controlled. So like
Yeah.
it is not totally there. But yeah, it was a very heartbreaking ending.
Yeah,
And
very intense, a lot going on, really fast.
you're like, they're finally together, and then they're not. Like, of course. Of course. Can't be a happy ending. Can't be a happy ending, Rebecca Ross. It is a two-parter though, so there is another book. So we'll see about
Yeah, well, I
that.
might just have to read it to know how this all comes back around because I'm now curious, like, you left us on a cliffhanger, now what happens?
Yeah, we can't talk about it until you read it because it's a lot. I have a lot of feelings about book two. That's all I will say. Good feelings,
Fair,
bad
fair.
feelings. I just have a lot of them. I won't share in what direction, but I do have a lot of feelings. So we'll reconvene that conversation when you catch up
Sounds good.
on that. On that. But so this is the end of this book, and we'll announce. Well, it's Kendall's pick next, but our next episode will actually be with Sarah Ryan, who is a grief poet, and it'll be a crossover episode. We'll also post it on our Two Girls with Grief podcast, just because we want to make sure people know that we moved the Grief Girls Book Club to its own section, but also it was a really good conversation that went way beyond just grief poems and her grief books. So really great conversation. Excited for everyone to listen to that one. And is there any other announcements? Exciting things? Anything in the book world you've seen?
Have to think about it.
Put anything in the show notes if we think of anything. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this book because I did really like it. It was very impactful on my grief journey. There was just some extra turns and twists or whatever for this book that, yeah. But I really like this one. And I will
Yeah.
not share what I feel about book two until Kendall's read it.
So what's your griefometer for this one?
For me, it I will stand by that. It was a 5 out of 5. Maybe second time around a 4 out of 5 for me. So when I first read it, I feel like I was still very sensitive, still very in need of a lot of processing for my grief journey. I think I will always be processing it because it's just crazy. But I was definitely in a place where like I feel like I needed to read some of these things. So when I first read the book, I cried in a lot of moments reading this book. And I read it like 3 years ago or something. So like when I first read it, I feel like I had a lot of tears. There's moments that like really hit me, stuff about the armor and not letting people in. There's so many moments that really got me and kind of was like, oh, I am doing that stuff. And I feel like I am doing these things with my grief. This time around, I feel like I had more of a lens and I was kind of more focused on the cute romance portion of this book than just the griefy parts. So I still will stand by that it can be a very impactful griefy read. So I'll say it was a 4 out of 5. But my first read in a more sensitive place, it was a 5 out of 5. But what about you?
Yeah, Yeah, I think it was a great book, like 5 out of 5 in fantasy. That was the most unique fantasy premise I've read in a really long time. I really loved the architecture and the infrastructure that she built for this magic system. Um, and then in regard to there were, like, some points where she would say something and I'd feel the ping, like, that grief hit. But the only part where I really, like, had me in tears was the one general who was talking about the sycamore tree, and that just, like, got me for some reason. It's not even a big part of the plot whatsoever, and yet that one part really just, like, got me good. But yeah, so I would say, I don't know, maybe like a 3 out of 5 in a tearometer sense.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it's definitely very cute romance, really fun fantasy, great little quips about grief, so it really had it all.
Yeah. And if you look at these episodes, you'll see like the things that like my mind went to where Aaron Kendall was like, yeah, the war elements, they were so real. And I was just like, oh yeah, I kind of like put the war elements in the back of my mind, like, oh, that's sad. I don't want to like focus on that. And I'm like, oh, but it's cute. They're in like the trenches together and they're flirting. And like our minds went in totally different directions of like where the war is. And Kendall's like, this looked very realistic and had really good war elements. And I was like, oh yeah, that is true. But like they were like passing notes and like that's so cute.
Love in the trenches.
Yeah. That could be a whole other book, honestly.
Yeah, Rebecca Ross, get on it, girl.
Yeah, just do one specifically for that show. Yeah, overall very great read. I'm very happy with this book. Besides the force thing at the end, I was kind of like, but besides that, I think it's a good book. We'll stay tuned for book 2 whenever that ends up on here. And we'll announce our read when Kendall chooses
Hey.
it for our next series.
Yes.
All right, everyone. I hope you're enjoying all of our book club episodes. And we post episodes every Thursday, and then every Friday you can watch the video version. So stay tuned. And for next week, where we have Sarah Ryan, and then from there you'll see Kendall's next pick. Bye, everyone.